Welcome to WCAT. I'm Kiki Latimer, and this is the Catholic Bookworm, where we read to learn, but we share with love in order to understand. Welcome. And I'm happy to have with me today Glenn Morrow. Welcome, Glenn.
Hello. Well,
Glenn's written a beautiful new book published by En route Books and Media called Vacation and Other Tales of Enduring Love. And it's got a beautiful cover, which we're going to be discussing the cover as well. But welcome, Glenn. And how about you start us off with a prayer?
okay. Dear Lord, as we enter into this season of Lent, preparing for your majesty, help us in our words and in our deeds to be more like you, to reflect the love and the peace that passes understanding and that brings us hope and joy. And in our writings, let us reflect that peace, that joy, that hope. That's what I try to do, and I hope that does convey to the readers. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Well, we're here on Ash Wednesday, 2025. This is a good way to start off Lent this year.
Yep.
With enduring love. Tell us a little bit tell us about yourself to begin with for those who don't know you who are listening.
Okay. Well, I for many years was involved in the oral storytelling movement. I was a storyteller and was also the editor of the National Storytelling magazine. And so I got very involved in the whole process of story making and the tradition of story. And in my works, there are a number of oral stories sprinkled in. There's one in navigation in this book, which is the story of the monk who carries water up the hill with the two pots, one of which is solid and brings the water, the full water, and the other one has a crack in it and it leaks along the way. But the leak, of course, waters the ground along the way, and wildflowers grow up. So involved in oral storytelling. I've also been a teacher of English, and I've been a technical writer, which is a whole other aspect. And in my writing, there are a lot of technological or technical details and such. These things interest me, and I hope they interest the readers, and that they don't weigh down the narrative. I try to keep a light hand on these things, but you know, there are things like the existence of matter and antimatter, and certain other things. There's all kind of stuff in these stories. So you'll learn some things, and I think that's one of the benefits of fiction. And this is fiction, is that you learn some concrete things about the world. You learn some things about the Grand Canyon or Venice, the mathematics of GPS systems. But don't worry, you don't need to know anything about mathematics to read the book. So that's all background for my writing. I've been fiction writing all my life, and since I retired, I've been able to focus on it more better, more full time. And I've been involved in writers groups for many years, and that has helped me to craft and develop my writing and to move it from the head to the heart, which is the most critical aspect of fiction writing, I feel, is that it not be merely clever or intricate, but that it be heartfelt. And at my best, I hope that my stories are deeply moving, and for all their intellectual froth of information, and for all of their their wittiness and cleverness, that the core of them is about people and about the heart, about the spirit.
Well, both your books, Things Beloved and this book, Vacation, both have beautiful covers. But this one, of course, has the cedar waxwings on it.
Yes, right.
And of course, I've known you and Deborah for many years, so I know that cedar waxwings have played a big part in your life.
Right.
But tell us why you chose this beautiful cover. And these birds are particularly sweet with one.
Well, when my wife and I were courting many years ago, we saw a pair of waxwings engaged in this courtship ritual, which is berry passing. And a waxwing will take a berry, and in this case, you can see it's in a sea of berries, so there's no lack of berries. But the waxwing will take a berry and pass it to its mate, and the mate will step aside, and then we'll pass it back, and they'll go back and forth with this one berry. And this is part of their courtship ritual, and it just struck us as a beautiful symbol of marriage. And it's the basic statement of it is, "I will nurture you, I will sustain you," which is the same thing as the marriage vows in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, that we sustain each other. And the waxwings make this statement by passing a berry. And if there are no berries, they will do the same thing with the petals of a flower and pass it back and forth. So it's so sweet. And it sets the tone for these stories. These are the stories of the sustaining power of love. These are not stories about falling in love or love being tested by the acts of one member of the couple or another. These are about people who are united in love and people who are sustained by the love and caring of each other, which I think we need more of in this world. Too often, our culture depicts love, especially married love, as either infatuation and desire, which is fine, or disillusionment and
ball and chain,
and that leads to infidelities and all this sort of thing. And we see that all over our culture. And these are stories about couples at work, couples that have been together and love each other and support each other. And those stories often seem like, oh, that's going to be a boring story. I mean, the whole story said it best, all happy couples are basically the same, but all unhappy couples are uniquely different. That's the start of Anna Karenina. But I beg to differ with Tolstoy. So I've created 4 happy couples who are tested by the world and who sustain each other and solve the problems that are thrown at them through their love for each other. And the problems that
it's refreshing to have 4 stories, like you're saying, where the characters just aren't like a shipwreck, that they're like you said, people that could be next door, people in your life, sort of almost in a sense, ordinary people having extraordinary lives,
right,
because of their enduring love for one another.
Right, and that extraordinariness is often edges on the absurd. That the things that happen to my characters are possible, but they're quirky. They're not the things that you expect, and that's one of my keynotes in writing is, if what you expect to happen didn't happen, what else could happen? There's in the story Navigation, one of the characters vanishes in a large public space in Venice, and and her mate, Lewis, has to go find her. And, there's lots of possibilities that we would think of as what happened to this woman. Was she abducted? Did she fall in a canal? What happened? In fact, it's none of
We wouldn't think of this, though.
So that's how I think about these stories. And
Navigation, of course, was my favorite because Lewis is navigation challenged. He can't get from point A to point B, can't get himself out of a paper bag. I have prosopagnosia, I have face blindness, so I could very much identify with the idea of having a problem like not being able to find your way around, having to create different types of maps to get you places.
yes.
Yeah.
Lewis is spatially challenged. He's on the extreme end of the May-Britt-Mosier spectrum, which I invented, although May-Britt-Mosier is a very real person. She won the Nobel Prize for figuring out the spatial mapping structures in the brain. And he gets lost in everywhere. And the only way that he can find his way is by drawing maps of his own devising, which are basically spirals linking one landmark to the next landmark to the next. And if he can see a landmark and move to that, and then look at his map and move to the next, then he can find his way. But, if you tell him, go 3 blocks and turn left, he's lost. And if you hand him a map,
of course, you've paired him up with a woman named Robin, and Robins know how to make their way around.
Right. And Robin, interestingly, is an ornithology graduate student who is studying the way that birds migrate. And so they're kind of a natural fit. Lewis, because he can't find his way anywhere, decides that he is going to study the mathematics of navigation, of wayfinding. And so they are both graduate students on campus when they meet, and they kind of meet cute, if you will. She nearly kills him the first time because she thinks he's a complete creep because he's standing there while she's working. And yes, and when she finally stands up from her stereo microscope and turns around, she goes into a martial arts stance and growls at him, "Get lost." And he does.
He does. He gets lost, yes. Love it. So it's interesting. So navigation was the last story.
Yes.
And you started, so that's your youngest couple. You actually started the book with the oldest couple.
Yes. Yeah, that was a deliberate choice. There are 4 couples in 4 stages of life. The first story is Mr. Coe's Garden, which involves a very old couple near the end of life. Then there's the story Vacation, which is a couple who have an adult children. And then there's the story Frogs, which is about a young couple who are expecting their first child. And then there's the story Navigation, which is Lewis and Robin, who are courting and go on a romantic trip to Venice, which is a place where everyone gets lost.
Where I got lost there once.
But the idea of that is that if you start reading, they can be read in any order. They're independent stories. They're not, the characters do not cross over from one story to another. But if you read them in that sequence, you first understand the maturity of love that has been seasoned by decades and decades of being together and by the events that have transpired in these people's lives. So that when you get to the end and you have a couple that are meeting and mating and eventually the story ends with marriage, you're seeing the course of a lifetime of enduring love, of sustaining love. And that was my intention of putting the stories in that sequence.
There's a lot of humor in your stories.
Yes, yeah, yep. There certainly is. I just can't. I think of life as a comedy, and I just cannot, write something that is too serious or too downbeat. It just doesn't feel like a natural fit for me, and it doesn't feel like what we need out there in the world is, stories about how grim things are and how hard things are. We all know that, and we
know that.
and there are plenty of books out there that will present that back to you. But I think that comedy and the unexpected, which is often a source of comedy, is leavening to our experience, because when you're telling a story is a microcosm, it's a way of seeing the world in miniature, that gives you some sense of how your world is, and you can map the two on each other. And so map your own life on a world that contains some humor, and then some delight and some joy, and and most of all, love.
I mean, what is it we say? Angels fly because they take themselves lightly, right? And I can't imagine getting through life and getting through the difficulties of life, marriage stuff, kids, grandchildren, without having a sense of humor, without being able to take ourselves lightly.
Right.
Some of my worst times in my life have been gotten through by good friends laughing about ourselves together, usually over a glass of wine.
Yeah. And a lot of the humor in these stories comes from the way that these couples know each other. For example, in Mr. Coe's garden, one of the first scenes, in Vacation, one of the first scenes is our hero at this kitchen stove making dinner, and his wife predictably gets hungry before the cooking is finished, and sneaks behind him and starts spooning half finished dinner out of the pot because she's hungry, and he knows that she's going to do this. She does this predictably, and so she says, "Well, dear, this is delicious. What's in it?" And he says, "An absence of summer squash, mostly." That's the humor of knowing each other, and knowing that people are going to, people you love are going to behave in the way that they do, and there's really nothing to be done except to love them in the way that they are.
Now, speaking of summer squash, Mr. Coe's garden, he doesn't seem to be growing vegetables.
No, basic setup of Mr. Coe's garden is Mr. Coe is an extremely old man, and he hires a teenager named Curtis, and Curtis is the narrator of the story, and Mr. Coe brings in Curtis to do some yard work, and Curtis shows up, expecting to do some weeding and some mowing, and Mr. Coe says, "I want you to tear up my entire backyard, tear up all the grass, and we're going to build an immense garden in the backyard where no one will see it." So Curtis starts doing this huge task, and he figures that Mr. Coe is going to plant a big vegetable garden, and Mr. Coe says, "No, vegetables belong in grocery stores where you can keep an eye on them." But what fascinates Curtis is that Mr. Coe has this unique way of talking and thinking about just about everything, and he uses language in elaborate ways. The first line of the story is, "Curtis, bring me a sack of dynamite and 50 feet of fuse." And this is Mr. Coe's way of saying, bring me some plant fertilizer and a garden hose. And Curtis doesn't understand half of what Mr. Coe is saying, which is a lot of the humor in this story, but it's also a lot of the poignancy in the story, because Mr. Coe has lived and loved a long life, and Curtis is a teenager, and he just doesn't get a lot of what Mr. Coe is saying, both factually and emotionally. There's a point where he thinks that Mr. Coe is being insulted, and in fact, Mr. Coe is absolutely delighted to have someone who knows him and cares about him saying this is how you always are, and so it's
and for a long time we wonder where Mrs. Coe is, which is
yes, we
part
do.
of the intrigue of the story, but I
Right.
won't mention anything more. But
Right.
a low profile for
Right.
quite a bit of the story.
The garden is being built as a gift for the strangely absent Mrs. Coe, and Curtis is who is building this garden says, I couldn't really ask him if his wife was dead, but I kind of asked him, and it proceeds, and Mrs. Coe, in fact, is not dead, but she is not at all what one expects. So.
In Vacation, you have some interesting characters. You've got Thomas and his wife, Grace.
Right.
But then you have a very angelic figure that shows up.
Well, is he angelic? There's a 7-foot tall man who dresses in beige, and he appears recurrently throughout the story and propels a lot of the action. He is at times referred to as an angel, and this actually comes from the experience of my wife Deborah's, which is that she had her car broke down in the parking lot, and she was in a terrible situation. She had to get home. She had no money, no resources. This is before cell phones, and suddenly a 7-foot tall man showed up, said, "Pop the hood," got the car going, and when she looked around, he had vanished. And she is convinced that this was an angel. And so our 7-foot tall man is an angel, but angels are messengers. They're not pretty images of abstract blessing. And this angel is a messenger, and the message he brings is a tough one. Our character, Thomas, who is a theologian, has to wrestle with the angel, not physically, but he has to wrestle with the angel psychologically and symbolically, like Jacob.
The beautiful line when the angel says, "I miss faith."
Right.
That's my favorite line.
Right. Thomas Kemp, the theologian, is delivering a lecture to a bunch of astronomers, and he's basically saying all of these scientific facts having to do with dark matter and matter and antimatter and the origins of galaxies and various other things all lend themselves to the assumption that there is a conscious, sustaining divinity who is benevolent. Otherwise, none of these things make any sense. So that is his theology, that God is the natural conclusion of the information we're given. And he delivers this lecture and the 7-foot tall man who is slouching in the front row of the lecture hall has the first question. And his question is not a question. It's a statement, I miss faith. And it's a challenge to Thomas, who has reduced God to a logical conclusion. This makes the most sense. We can believe in this God because all the facts line up, and that leaves a lot out.
Right. I miss faith, hope, love.
Yeah.
It's interesting at Mass this morning, Ash Wednesday, when you were saying just now, this idea of the celestial heavens, and I was thinking of, celestial dust, because our priest mentioned this way, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And then he just looked at us all and he said, we are beloved dust. And it was just like, wow. Beloved, we're not just dust, we are beloved dust. And it was really fascinating to me, because I had just this vision of this beautiful celestial dust, and there's that, the importance of faith, that comes into the story. And that's what makes the story beautiful, the faith, the hope, and the love.
Yes, right. And especially the love between Thomas and his wife, Grace, and their love for their child, Rafe, who is described as being domestically challenged. So this is a guy who doesn't see the point in living indoors. And they've tried to set him up in apartments and such, and he's peripatetic. He's a nomad, and they can't seem to do anything about it. And this is one of the crosses that they carry. And Thomas says, it took me years to figure this out, but he was not irresponsible. He was just differently responsible. And but the story pivots around Thomas and Grace's love for and desire to protect and to sustain their son Rafe. And the angel comes and delivers a message that Rafe is in dire danger, and that Thomas needs to do something about this. And it's not clear what he can and should do about it, but that's the story. Yeah.
Beautiful story. And then you take us into the world of tadpoles. Of course, I'm a great tadpole lover. In spring, I go in search of tadpoles every year. Love the little creatures. Certainly remember a teacher in one of my elementary school years bringing tadpoles in, as Danielle does. She's a second grade teacher in your story.
Right. Well, Danielle is my image of the exemplary elementary school teacher. She is using a tank full of tadpoles to teach her children all kinds of lessons, everything from biology to mathematics and statistics, and also teaching them about caring and about love and about family, and all of this through this tank of tadpoles, and all of it at the level that a second grader could take in. And so I love Danielle as a teacher, and she's leading her children, who are second grade and are, of course, metamorphizing themselves into who they will become through the metamorphosis of tadpoles into frogs. And at the same time, she's undergoing her own metamorphosis, because unbeknownst to her students and most of the faculty, she is in the early stages of pregnancy. And
growing her own little tadpole.
She's growing her own tadpole. And she and her husband, Simon, are those scenes in the classroom alternate with the scenes of the two of them discussing the pregnancy and how she's going to maintain these two worlds, how she's going to continue teaching in the classroom and go through this pregnancy. And the problem in the story is, in order to become pregnant, she had to stop taking a medication that she's been taking. And so that creates issues. And that's how the story develops. And it is through the love of Simon for Danielle, and vice versa, that they resolve these issues and figure out a way forward that works.
I loved all four stories. I've told you Navigation was my favorite, but all four stories are really delightful. Just a breath of fresh air, like we were saying earlier, to have, enduring love, people that work at it, each story has issues and problems that the people in the relationship are facing. So it's not like Hallmark honky-dory. There's nothing honky-dory about your stories.
The issues between the issues come in from the outside. They don't come necessarily from within the relationship. I mean, there is some of that in Mr. Coe's garden, in that they do have a difference of opinion, but it is resolved, and we come to understand each of their positions, and each of their positions is based on love for the other, not on some negative emotion, but each of them thinks that this way of being is the most loving toward the other, and that forms part of the crux of it. But I want to talk about time capsules, because in the middle of Mr. Coe's garden, Curtis, our teenager, digs up a time capsule.
He does.
And Mr. Coe says, well, we'll just bury that again. And Curtis, of course, has never really heard of time capsules, and is fascinated by the idea that Mr. Coe buried this stainless steel container with something valuable in it. And it turns out what is valuable in it is Mr. Coe and Mrs. Coe, when they were young, newly married, wrote down their love story. Each of them took a notebook and wrote down, from the day they met, everything that had gone on in their love for each other, and put those two notebooks, no peeking, in this time capsule, because they felt like that was their prayer against despair at that moment. That phrase is one that resonates for me through all of these stories: a prayer against despair. That the actions of love and the actions of cherishing and sustaining are prayers to keep us from the despair of whatever else happens in our lives. And some bad things loom in these stories, because they're basically positive stories that are redemptive and hopeful. Those bad things do not dominate. They don't win. And there are no villains in these stories. So these events that challenge these people bring out their love for each other, and they speak, each in their own way, their prayer against despair. Each other.
I mean, each of your stories really shows sort of the quiet, sometimes sneaky ways that grace works in our lives.
Yes.
When we have faith.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yes, it does, and it's not accidental that the wife character in Navigation, I'm sorry, in Vacation is named Grace. And they're going down the Grand Canyon on muleback, Grace and Thomas. And Thomas is thinking to himself, because Grace is a horsewoman and she's very comfortable on a mule. Thomas, not so much. And he's thinking about phrases like the fall from grace. And so there are puns there, but there is also that sense of the grace that we manifest to each other, which is a reflection of divine grace. And I hope that comes through in these stories.
Now, I know you got a really good review from Circus Review for Vacation.
Yes.
That was cool.
Yes. Kirkus is a pre-publication service that books are submitted to them, and they assign them to some anonymous reviewer who gives a review, and the review, there's no guarantee that the review is going to be positive. Pays your money, it takes your chances. If
it's bad, you never mention it to anyone.
But they gave me quite a positive review, and the thing that meant most to me is, well, they thought that their stories were deeply felt and fully realized, and since so much in these stories is pretty quirky and bordering on the, somewhere between the unlikely and the possibly impossible, especially Vacation, which is the title story is the most sort of operatic and out there one, with the encounter of the 7-foot-tall man who certainly seems to be an angelic messenger. Whether he is or not, we'll never know for sure, but he certainly presents himself in that way. That Kirkus felt that these stories were believable, and that they were felt like they were lived in, that they were places where people could see the real world, and they felt that, well, the most important thing they said was that these stories will linger with the reader long after they close the book, and that, I think, is the highest, the highest accolade I could have asked for, is that you don't just read these stories and say, oh, well, that was entertaining, that they linger in your mind, in your spirit, and hopefully we are changed by the fiction we read. That's
the hope.
Yeah.
We are changed by what we read.
Yeah.
That, fiction brings, goodness, truth, and beauty, helps us to see something in a different way.
Yes.
I loved all 4 stories. I was reading them lazily, sitting by a pool in Florida in December, and just lazily reading. It's a good way to put it. And I found myself just amazed, enlightened. And they're very joyful, and and they have stayed with me. The characters stayed. They're good. I just really recommend the book. I love it.
Right. And you'll find out some things about the Grand Canyon and frog biology and some other things that you never knew. So
I think that's one of the fun things about how you write, is that, you do throw in sort of technical things, but explained at the level, make them very enjoyable and sort of absorb concepts and ideas that we don't use often in everyday life, but we become acquainted with.
Right.
That's really sweet.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the thoughts that we don't think that often, because so much of our thinking runs in well-worn grooves. And then so much of our discourse with each other is about, how do you fit into this groove? Do you run along this groove, or do you run contrary to it? And we'll argue about that. But there's a whole other world of things that are just, they're real, and they're interesting in themselves, and they're poignant themselves. I'll give you a small example. One of the things that Danielle thinks about is she's about to have a baby, and they have not selected the name for the child. And they don't know the sex of the child, and they don't want to know the sex of the child. And so she thinks about whether you pick two names, a boy name and a girl name, and what happens to that name of the child that wasn't used. Is that there's a kind of phantom there, that if we have a boy, that girl name that we've manifested and envisioned in our mind, does it just drift off? Does it linger? Not something we think about a whole lot, but it's very real, and it's beautiful, and it's poignant, I feel.
Love that. Are you working on something else yet?
Yes, I am actually. Well, I have a story that I did after these, which is called Christmas in July, which is exactly that. It's a story about a mother who declares that the family is going to celebrate Christmas in July, and the children are not responding to it in the way that she might have hoped. The boy, who is somewhat older, is completely mortified that all of his friends are going to see his parents putting reindeer on the lawn in July, and he's just going to be, his life is over. He's going to beg for the rest of his life about this. And his younger sister just kind of jumps in. She decides she's going to make snowflakes out of every piece of paper she can find, and that everybody has to help her make snowflakes because, that's her project. So that's a story that I'm planning to put that up on my website, which is glenmorrowbooks.com. There's more information on vacation, and also my first book, which is Things Beloved, which has 2 stories in it. And right now, I just started something that I'm hoping will work out. And it may be a novel length, I don't know, but the germ of the idea is that a person discovers that they own a house that they have no remembrance of, and they have to go and find out about this house, and the house has tenants, and so
Sounds like a dream I've had.
it kind of originated in a dream, but it's working out to a story about memory, about forgetting, about community, that you move from a place of isolation where you're just dealing with a world of paper to a world of people. And what do you do if you suddenly find out you own a property that people are living in? So
Kind of reminds me of the DNA tests and genetic tests that people are doing now, where you suddenly find out you have a family,
yes,
thing somewhere. that you didn't, or relatives that you didn't know existed.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. You know,
It's quite a story.
yeah, it's one of those stories that I'm just drawn to, which is if what you expect didn't happen, what would, what could, so.
It's a great way to start a story. What could happen if what you expected doesn't happen and something else does? I love it. I love it. Is there anything else about vacation and other tales of enduring love that you'd like to mention that we didn't get to as we meandered here?
Well, first of all, I want to say that it is dedicated to my wife, Deborah, and that our enduring love is behind so much of this book. Though none of the characters in it are Deborah, and none of the characters are me. It's pure fiction, imaginative fiction. But we draw from our experience to understand people who are maybe quite different from us, but the heart is the same. The heart is universal. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to my beloved Deborah.
Is Deborah there? Can she say hello to us?
She's vanished.
She's vanished. Okay. All right. What's with this enduring thing? Where is she?
She's enduring, believe me. Yeah. And you're also lucky that the two kittens have been sleeping, because otherwise they would have been right in this camera warning.
Simon and Sailor, yes.
Yes.
We're hoping to meet them. Well, maybe we'll meet them on our next interview.
Okay.
But I really thank you, Glenn. It's a beautiful book, 4 just wonderful stories that do bring us goodness, truth, beauty, insights into how love endures. And yeah, so thank you. The book, where can we get it? We can obviously get it on Amazon. It's an en route.
Yeah, it is. Both of my books were published by En route. Vacation, of course, is the latest one we've been talking about. The earlier one, Things Beloved, is also available from En route. The stories are similar in many ways. The stories of Things Beloved, as the title indicates, are more about how connection to a beloved object creates bonds between people and causes the heart to open and to make sacrifices and to cherish each other. But Vacation, the stories are about couples. They are available.
And we have an interview of the previous book. So if you're interested in Things Beloved, you can find that on WCAT Catholic Bookworm as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Kiki, for that interview.
Both delightful. Do you want to end us with a prayer?
I certainly will. Yeah. Thank you, Lord, for all of these good words that we've said today. Please wash away all the all the clumsy statements that as we strive toward some kind of truth and grace and clarity, and bless our listeners. May they take the germ and blow away the husk. And thank you to WCAT, to Kiki, to Sebastian, to all who have been involved in this. Bless them in their endeavors going forward. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, and stay in touch. And we'll hopefully have you back when this house that has popped up gets completely written. Please come back.
Yes, of course. Well, we may be in some completely different place. You never know, because I just start writing, and it takes me in unexpected directions, and that's part of the joy of it all. So,
And just quickly again, your website is
Glenn Morrow books.com. That's Glenn with two N's, Morrow books.com. And
great.
there's much more information on both books there, and some things that I added called "You Can't Make This Stuff Up," which are some sidelights on details in some of these things that are really quite astonishing. Tycho Brahe's mustache, for example, which we won't go into, but
You got us curious. So glenmorrowbooks.com.
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much, Glenn. This has been delightful.
Yes, thank you, Kiki.
God bless.
Bless.